Have you ever wondered if even the most solid rock can crack, or the most torrential river can split its course? The history of humanity, and especially the history of faith, has witnessed such moments when seemingly eternal unity shatters into fragments, leaving deep scars and unforgettable lessons. Today, we will journey back in time 1,000 years ago to witness a grand tragedy of Christian faith, the Great Schism, an event that divided a vast family into two distinct branches. Imagine a time when Christianity, though still young compared to ancient civilizations, had grown powerfully, spreading everywhere. From the sun-drenched shores of ancient Rome to the mystical cities of the East, one faith connected millions of hearts, regardless of origin, status, or language. For over 1,000 years after the ascension of Jesus, the Christian Church was a unified body. Though vast and diverse, from Rome in the west to Constantinople in the east, from Alexandria in the south to Antioch in the north, all shared the same creed, the same Eucharist, and the same belief in the Holy Trinity. The bishops, from the Roman pontiff to the Eastern patriarchs, regarded each other as brothers, together preserving and spreading the teachings of the apostles. It was a magnificent picture of unity and faith, a testament to the power of love and oneness that Christ had preached. But life and history are rarely a straight path. Even the most sturdy ancient trees can grow separate branches, and sometimes those branches develop in entirely different directions. The seeds of division began to sprout from an event that seemed purely political, the division of the Roman Empire. To facilitate the governance of such a vast empire, Roman emperors decided to split it into two parts: the Western Roman Empire, centered in Rome, and the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, with its new capital Constantinople, New Rome. This division was not merely a border on a map. It was a separation of spirit, language, culture, and worldview. The West, with its Latin language, focused on law, organization, and practicality. The Western Church, under the leadership of the Roman pontiff, gradually developed a more centralized structure. Emphasizing the supreme role of the successor of St. Peter, they lived in a world constantly facing the collapse of empires and invasions by barbarian tribes, which further reinforced the need for a strong and centralized spiritual authority to maintain order. Meanwhile, the East, with its Greek language, was immersed in philosophy, theology, and mysticism. The Eastern Church, centered in Constantinople, along with other ancient churches like Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, maintained a more collegial model. They respected the Roman pontiff as first among equals, primus inter pares, the elder brother in the family of patriarchs, but did not recognize his absolute jurisdiction over the entire church. They lived in a more prosperous and stable Byzantine Empire, where the close link between church and state, Caesaropapism, forged a distinct identity, with patriarchs and emperors together preserving the integrity of faith and nation. You see, division never occurs for a single reason. It is the sum of small differences, accumulating over time, nurtured by geographical and cultural distance, and sometimes even human pride. Seemingly simple linguistic differences led to profound misunderstandings in the interpretation of theological concepts. A word in Greek could carry a completely different nuance of meaning when translated into Latin, creating invisible gaps in thought and belief. One of the subtle yet weighty differences was the Western theologians' addition of a small clause to the Nicene Creed, Filioque, meaning, and from the Son. The original creed, as defined by the ecumenical councils, proclaimed that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father. But the West, in an effort to clarify Trinitarian theology and combat heresies, added the Filioque, proclaiming that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. For the West, this was a natural development of doctrine, a necessary clarification. But for the East, this was an alteration of a sacred dogma established by the ecumenical councils, without the consensus of the entire Church, especially the Eastern patriarchs. This was not merely a grammatical issue, but a challenge to the authority of the councils and the unity of doctrine. Beyond theological differences, there were also liturgical and disciplinary divergences, seemingly minor matters that nonetheless touched the heart of daily faith life. The West used unleavened bread in the Eucharist, recalling the unleavened bread of the Jewish Passover, symbolizing Christ's sacrifice. Conversely, the East used leavened bread, symbolizing new life, Christ's resurrection. A small detail in the sacred meal, yet it carried profound theological meanings and became a symbol of difference. Clerical celibacy was another point of contention. While the Western Church gradually imposed celibacy on its priests, the Eastern Church still permitted married priests ordained after marriage. This was a difference in discipline, in way of life, yet it touched the heart of monastic and family life, reflecting differing views on holiness and the role of clergy in the community. Even fasting regulations, especially during Lent, showed significant differences between the two traditions. Each difference, whether profound theology or a minor ritual, was like a delicate thread. As the number of these threads grew, they gradually wove into a thick curtain of separation, obscuring the vision of those who were once brothers in one house. Two worlds, two cultures, two approaches to faith, though sharing a common root, gradually drifted apart, not just geographically but spiritually. Mutual respect, though still present, began to give way to suspicion, criticism, and at times, even contempt. And so, over hundreds of years, two paths, though sharing a common starting point, gradually diverged. The voices of disagreement grew louder, the suspicions deeper. A tragedy was slowly taking shape, a tragedy no one desired, yet one that seemed inevitable. The question was, would any bonds remain strong enough to hold these two worlds together, or would they completely break apart? We will explore this in the next part, as these tensions reach their peak and the Christian Church faces the fateful moment of permanent separation. And so, time passed, carrying with it the whispers of disagreement, the echoes of suspicion, and ever-deepening cracks in the wall of unity. Day by day, month by month, year by year, the chasm between the two worlds, West and East, widened, not just geographically but spiritually. Though they worshipped the same God and read the same scripture, they began to view each other through the lens of difference rather than similarity. By the mid-11th century, tensions had become a rope stretched taut like a bowstring, waiting for only a small impact to snap. The two main figures in this tragedy were Pope Leo IX in Rome and Patriarch Michael, the first Cerularius in Constantinople. Both were strong men, steadfast in their faith and traditions, but also carrying a measure of pride and intolerance, which made the schism inevitable. Michael Cerularius, Patriarch of Constantinople, was a man of iron will, determined to protect the authority and independence of the Eastern Church. He viewed the claims of papal supremacy not only as an interference in the internal affairs of the Eastern Church, but also as an undermining of Greek tradition and identity. He began to openly criticize Western practices, especially the use of unleavened bread in the Eucharist, considering it a serious deviation from apostolic tradition. He even ordered the closure of Latin churches in Constantinople and confiscated their property, an aggressive act unacceptable to Rome and a direct challenge. From Rome's side, Pope Leo IX was also a passionate leader, strongly believing in the supremacy of the successor of St. Peter. He regarded Patriarch Cerularius' challenge to his authority as an insult not only to himself personally, but also to the entire universal church he represented. In response to Cerularius' actions, Pope Leo IX dispatched a delegation to Constantinople in 1054. The head of this delegation was Cardinal Humbert of Silva Candida, a figure also known for his rigid and uncompromising character. This was not a delegation of reconciliation, but one with a clear mission, to assert papal supremacy and demand Patriarch Cerularius' submission. Ironically, Cardinal Humbert and Patriarch Cerularius possessed such opposing personalities that they could find no common ground. They did not seek to understand or listen to each other, but only saw differences and what they perceived as errors in the other. Each exchange, instead of diffusing the situation, only fanned the flames of tension more fiercely, pushing both sides into an inescapable confrontation. Cardinal Humbert, with absolute confidence in papal supremacy, used harsh words accusing the Eastern Church of many errors, including not recognizing the Filioque clause and permitting married clergy. He even compared the Eastern Church to a den of heretics, an unacceptable insult. Patriarch Cerularius, already proud and discontent, felt even more deeply offended. He refused to meet the papal delegation directly, considering them intruders with no right to question his church, a public disdain for Rome's authority. And then the fateful moment arrived. On Saturday, July 16, 1054, Cardinal Humbert and two other papal legates entered the magnificent Hagia Sophia Basilica in Constantinople just before the Divine Liturgy was to begin. In a dramatic and symbolic act, they placed a bull of excommunication on the main altar. This bull not only excommunicated Patriarch Michael Cerularius but also all who supported him, accusing him and the Eastern clergy of numerous serious offenses, including removing the Filioque clause from the Creed, a false accusation, as the East had never accepted it and always considered it an illegitimate addition. This act was not merely a theological declaration, but a severe blow to the honor and authority of the Eastern Church. It was the culmination of hundreds of years of accumulated misunderstandings, differences, and power ambitions. As Cardinal Humbert departed, he shook the dust from his feet, a gesture signifying the renunciation of all responsibility and the severing of all ties, as if there was nothing more to be said. Patriarch Cerularius's response was swift. Just a few days later, on July 24, 1054, a local synod in Constantinople convened and issued a counter-excommunication against Cardinal Humbert and the papal legates. Although technically this bull did not directly excommunicate Pope Leo IX, as he had died earlier, it formalized the schism. Patriarch Cerularius's bull accused the Western delegation of numerous wrongdoings, including altering the creed and church practices as well as arrogance and disrespect. And so the Great Schism occurred. An event that seemed merely a dispute between a few high-ranking clerics, yet it possessed the power to permanently divide a unified body that had existed for over 1,000 years. From that day forward, Christianity was no longer a single unified entity. It split into two major branches, the Roman Catholic Church in the West, with the Pope as its supreme head, and the Eastern Orthodox Church, a communion of self-governing churches, each with its own patriarch, but sharing a common faith and tradition, and regarding the Patriarch of Constantinople as first among equals. This was a historical tragedy, a deep wound suffered by both sides. It was not merely a division of theology or ritual, but a division of brotherhood, of empathy and understanding. Two worlds, once brothers, now became strangers, viewing each other with suspicion and sometimes even hostility, transforming differences into insurmountable barriers. In the following centuries, efforts at reunification were made, often under political or military pressure. Councils such as the Council of Lyon in 1274 and the Council of Florence in 1439 are prime examples. At Lyon, Byzantine Emperor Michael VIII Palaiologos, facing the threat from the Turks and desiring Western support, agreed to Rome's terms, including accepting papal supremacy and the Filioque clause. A declaration of unity was signed, but it was merely on paper. The Eastern clergy and people did not accept it. They regarded it as a betrayal of their faith and tradition, a compromise for political gain, and when the emperor died, the agreement was swiftly annulled, leaving a deeper scar. The Council of Florence nearly 2 centuries later repeated a similar scenario. Once again, the Byzantine Empire was on the verge of collapse due to the expansion of the Ottoman Empire. Emperor John VIII Palaiologos and Patriarch Joseph II of Constantinople, along with many Eastern bishops, traveled to Florence seeking assistance. After lengthy and intense debates, a unity agreement was again signed, including the acceptance of the Filioque and papal supremacy, albeit with some special provisions for Eastern rites. But just like Lyon, the Florence Agreement never truly took root in the heart of the Eastern Church. The people and most of the clergy refused to accept it, viewing it as a betrayal of Orthodox faith. They preferred to endure the rule of the Muslim Turks rather than accept the supremacy of the Roman Pope. A Byzantine nobleman famously declared, "Better the turban of the Turk in Constantinople than the tiara of the Roman cardinal." These efforts, though stemming from good intentions or sometimes merely political desperation, failed to heal the wound. On the contrary, they further deepened the division, increased suspicion, and solidified the belief that unity was impossible. The Great Schism was not just a historical event, but also a profound lesson on the fragility of unity. It showed that even with a common root of faith, differences in culture, politics, theology, and especially human pride can lead to tragic and long-lasting consequences. Hundreds of years have passed, and the wound remains aching and not fully healed. But is there a glimmer of hope for reconciliation, for healing the cracks that have persisted for so long? Can a bridge be built to connect the two divided riverbanks? We will explore this in the final part of this story, as the astonishing efforts to mend this historical wound are unveiled. We will explore this in the final part of this story, as the astonishing efforts to mend this historical wound are unveiled. After hundreds of years of separation, after the deep scars left by the failed reunification attempts at Lyon and Florence, it seemed as though there was no hope left for healing. The wound of the Great Schism had become an inseparable part of Christian history, a painful reminder of the fragility of unity and the destructive power of human pride. The two churches, Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, continued on their separate paths, developing independently in theology, liturgy, and discipline, yet deep down, the pain of separation still smoldered. However, history often unexpectedly reveals glimmers of light where darkness seemed to have completely enveloped everything. In the mid-20th century, a new wind began to blow through the Christian world. Following the devastating ravages of two world wars, a yearning for peace, a deeper awareness of the necessity of fraternity and solidarity among peoples and religions arose. In this context, the ecumenical movement, the effort to seek unity among Christian churches, began to flourish. And then a historic moment arrived, a moment many believed was guided by the hand of the Almighty. In 1965, the world witnessed an unprecedented event in nearly a millennium. The two supreme leaders of the churches that had excommunicated each other, Pope Paul VI of the Roman Catholic Church and Patriarch Athenagoras I of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, together performed a profoundly significant gesture of reconciliation. Imagine the scene, not in a fierce theological confrontation, not in a council with fiery debates, but in a spirit of fraternity and humility. On December 7, 1965, nearly 1,000 years after the painful event of 1054, Pope Paul VI in Rome and Patriarch Athenagoras I in Constantinople simultaneously issued a joint declaration. This declaration was not merely a diplomatic document, but a deeply symbolic act, a proclamation of the will for reconciliation. In that declaration, the two leaders together removed the excommunications exchanged in 1054 between the churches of the East and West. They did not declare that the churches were fully unified in theology or structure. No, that was not the primary goal. The main purpose was to erase from memory and from the heart of the Church the excommunications that had been exchanged, and to regret the words and actions that had caused injury and misunderstanding in the past. This was an act of forgiveness, of acknowledging fault, of casting aside historical burdens to open a new path. That moment resonated throughout the world. It was not just a Christian event, but a lesson for all humanity. It showed that even the deepest wounds, divisions that seemed impossible to heal, could still be assuaged by love, humility, and the will for reconciliation. It was a powerful testament to the strength of forgiveness, the ability to overcome the past and move towards the future. However, it is crucial to understand, the lifting of the excommunications in 1965 did not mean that complete unity had been established. It was a colossal step forward, a bridge built across a chasm, but the road ahead remains long and challenging. The theological differences, especially concerning the Filioque clause and papal supremacy, still persist. Differences in liturgy, discipline, and even cultural misunderstandings accumulated over centuries could not vanish overnight. Since 1965, dialogue between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church has significantly intensified. Numerous high-level meetings between popes and patriarchs, and mixed theological commissions have been established to discuss differences, seek mutual understanding, and identify points of consensus. Significant progress has been made in recognizing the value and richness of each other's traditions. Many scholars, priests, and faithful from both sides have tirelessly strived to learn, respect, and love one another, casting aside old prejudices. But complete unity, full communion, where the two churches can celebrate the Holy Eucharist together and fully share the faith, remains an unachieved goal. It is a journey that demands infinite patience, profound humility, and, above all, the intervention of divine grace. It is not merely a matter of theology, but also a matter of the heart, of learning to see others not as strangers or adversaries, but as brothers and sisters in the same family of faith. The Great Schism, the tragedy of Christian division, is a complex story shaped by myriad factors: theology, politics, culture, and especially human pride. It is a powerful reminder of the fragility of unity, of how small differences can be inflated into insurmountable walls of separation if love, understanding, and humility are absent. But at the same time, this story also brings a message full of hope. It shows that even after nearly a millennium of separation, even after deep wounds that seemed incurable, reconciliation is still possible. The actions of Pope Paul VI and Patriarch Athenagoras were not just a historical event, but a beacon of light for all of us. It teaches us that no rift is too great to mend, no hatred too deep to forgive, provided we have enough courage to set aside our ego, enough love to embrace differences, and enough faith in the power of reconciliation. In each of our lives, in family relationships, friendships, communities, and even on the international stage, division always exists. Disagreements, differences in belief, and conflicts of interest can easily lead to small, great schisms in our personal lives. The story of the Great Schism is not exclusively for religious history. It is a mirror reflecting all human struggles to maintain and regain unity. It invites us to ponder: are we willing to set aside disagreements, prejudices, and past hurts to seek a common path? Are we humble enough to admit our mistakes, generous enough to forgive others, and brave enough to build bridges instead of walls? The journey towards unity may be long and arduous, but the spark of hope always burns brightly. The Great Schism is a tragedy, but also a powerful call to compassion, understanding, and love. It reminds us that, no matter how many differences exist, we are all human, all yearning for peace and connection. And it is in seeking that connection, in striving to mend the rifts, that we truly find the deepest meaning of existence and an enduring hope for a more harmonious future. Let this story inspire us, not only to understand the past, but also to build a better future where unity is cherished and love triumphs over all division.